Wizards have as much faith in magic as software designers have in software, none at all. A wizard is explaining to the rest of the party why they won't use magic to solve all their problems. No, Mortimer, I will not be mending your boot with magic. You have a needle and thread, use it. Alaric turned back to his stew in the campfire, irritated for easily the dozenth time since they set camp for the evening. Aw, come on old mate, it'll just take a moment. Mortimer in turn whined, a sound that fell on Alaric's ears like the gibbering of 1,000 Malek spawn. With a heavy sigh, Alaric took the last few bites of his stew and set the bowl aside, turning back to the thief, the knight and guide paying close attention having heard these lessons before. Mortimer, may I assume you have little actual experience with magic? Alaric rested his elbow on his knee and in turn his chin on his hand, his long black beard with silver streaks tangling loosely around his hand and forearm. I mean, I've seen plenty of magic. Lighting, fireballs, monsters from thin air. He clearly intended to continue an exhaustive list, but Alaric held up his free hand. Please, Mortimer, I understand. You have seen easy uses of magic. Mortimer stopped, 3 fingers still held up while he raised an eyebrow. Easy? It can't be easy to hurl the raw forces of nature at a bunch of goblins. Those things all want to run wild, especially the monsters. I tell why. Alaric again interrupted him with a hand. Yes, I said easy, because they are. Have you not noticed that all but the most power wizards flee under the distraction caused by their summoned beasts? That is because they have zero control over what said beasts do. Fire? That is just gathering up heat and pressure and throwing a sulfur stone. Lightning? Pulling the electricity from the ether and throwing a quicksilver-filled sphere of iron. Those spells are more about throwing something with accuracy than anything else, and when they hit. Boom. Alaric suddenly jumps up, his arms outstretched over his head and screaming as loud as he can. Mortimer jumps and tumbles backwards off of his stump with what can only be described as a squeak. The knight, Sir Torald, and the guide, Sabina, both let out a hearty laugh. Meanwhile, Mortimer climbs back onto his stump sheepishly. Well, if those are so damned easy, then fixing my boot should be a breeze. He grumbles, holding up his boot and sticking a finger through the hole in the toe. No, quite the opposite. You see, mending something that is broken requires many infinitesimal alterations to the magics drawn from the ether. It requires everything be precise according to the subject being repaired. If I make a mistake, it could work out still with it looking slightly off, but it also could make your boot a living thing that is just waiting for you to slide your next meal into it unawares. Alaric stands there, waiting for a response. You mean, it might eat my bloody foot? Mortimer stares at his boot, horrified by the thought. Bloody would be right. Would you like to know what happened to the last poor soul that convinced me to fix their boot? We had to run from a pack of Isad wolves. We were making good headway, and the fool shouted some phrase in Elvish, and then promptly exploded. Myself, dear Sabina, and noble Torald were covered in the remnants of the fool. The only good that came of it was the beasts chasing us got scared and ran. On cue, Torald and Sabina both bowed their heads and put a hand to their hearts, barely stifling laughter. Now, I will ask you again with all of that in mind, would you like me to fix your boot? Alaric smiled at Mortimer, extending a hand and waiting to see if the thief hands him his boot. I'll just get the thread, Mortimer replied, his face full of shock and dread while Alaric sat back down, winking and smiling to Torald and Sabina as he turned his back to Mortimer.